After watching the Grammys the other night, something stood out to me like a sore thumb. And no, it wasn't the fact that Billie Eilish got robbed like Old Man Quilez and Juice, nor was it the fact the Grammys was doing more glazing than a donut shop with Not Like Us. Come on now, the song was dope, but let's not go too far. My main issue was the fact R&B was not showcased at all. There were no R&B performers and none of the R&B categories were televised. Why is that? For years, there have been a lot of discourse about how R&B is a dying art form where it's no longer as passionate or as loving the way it was in the 90s, 80s, early 2000s, whatever decade people would like to use to compare to the modern day of R&B. And yes, I do agree, a lot has changed, but there are a lot of phenomenal artists of today like Tone Stith, Division, Chantel May, Snow Allegra, Gallant, Raheem, Duran Bernard, Tim's, Money Long, Leon Thomas, Ari Lennox, all of these unique talents that bring something different to the genre of R&B. And as a person who loves R&B, I'm always looking for a new R&B artist. So in the comments, tell me who are your favorite R&B artists right now so I can check them out. Despite the plethora of talent in the R&B space, I can admit that there are a lot of elements that once made this genre so great are currently missing in today's landscape of music. And here they are. Singers no longer sweat. They're too cool to break a sweat nowadays. When I used to watch performance clips of Teddy Pendergrass, Whitney Houston, and Luther Vandross, who are some of the sweatiest singers you would ever see in your life, I would always be surprised because they never left their box when they performed. They only performed literally right in front of the microphone stand. They did no dancing, but somehow they were drenched in sweat. Maybe because they sung with so much heart and passion that the sweat would just emit from their skin and just pour onto the floor so the audience could see. Like, I understand it. Even like other sweaty singers like Chris Brown, Usher, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Sierra, like these were sweaty ass singers. They didn't mind having pit stains in their shirts to show that they were really about what they were doing. And these days, I've been to a lot of R&B concerts and I haven't seen a single singer sweat in a very long time. And I believe the problem is that a lot of these singers want to fit the rapper aesthetic. You know, the too cool for school, that I don't want to do anything. Number two, producers are no longer real musicians. We can always take it back to the Quincy Jones days when he was summoning an entire band to help him produce an album for a specific artist. And even later in the years in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s where the analog production became more prevalent, producers still had to know how to use chords and strings. Look at Babyface. He knows how to make music with instruments. Even later on in the years in the 90s, Timbaland, Pharrell, they knew how to create music with instruments while also using analog. But nowadays, producers are just 100% digital. They only use preset sounds that's available to them. And it's good. I'm mad at that fact is that I feel like the musicianship was a huge factor in creating R&B music. That part has been taken away. So we're lacking a part of the soul that helped create the music that we once loved. And that's why nowadays we're not as connected to R&B as we once were, because it's all digital. To my next point, because producers are no longer musicians, they usually disregard the entire point of making a bridge. I don't understand why within the production they no longer make bridges, which means singers no longer write bridges, which means bridges altogether have been nearly erased from the genre of R&B. Back in the day, especially in the 90s, the bridge was possibly the most important part of the song. It was the part that brought everything else together. The hook, the verse, the chorus, the background vocals, everything popped because of the bridge. In most parts, and in a lot of classic R&B songs, the bridge was the most popular part of the song because that was the section of the song that allowed the singer to really pour out their heart and showcase their true vocal talent without the constraints of the traditional lyrical structure. You think about Boyz II Men, Mariah Carey, and even Destiny's Child. The most most famous parts of their songs were always the bridges of which Michelle Williams sung. Like, those parts were just so amazing. The section of the song that we all connected to the most, that is gone. We do still have R&B artists who implement bridges in their songs, but that is still very few and far in between because the production no longer allows them to have bridges. Now, my next talking point is a little bit more complicated, so I'm gonna try my best to explain. So one of the main issues a lot of R&B listeners have today are how a lot of singers are really just doubling down on the toxicity of R&B, saying it's too toxic, there's not enough love, which quite honestly I disagree with, because R&B since its inception with Ray Charles has always been a toxic genre. If you listen to Ray Charles' song I Got a Woman, that's about him cheating on his wife with a woman who's downtown. Even if you listen to the music of Donnell Jones or Neo, their music was based on the fact that they were ain't shit men, but they made it sound beautiful. It was a little subtle. But these days the singers are kind of a little, not only much raunchier than they used to be back then, but it's just more in your face with the I don't give a fuck about your feelings type of thing, or I'm gonna keep hurting you over and over and over because I don't care, you're gonna take me back. Brent Faiyaz, right? Like, he makes great music, but his toxicity is just really in your face, and I feel like that rubs a lot of people the wrong way with R&B. Is that R&B aesthetic has been gone. Once again, as I mentioned before, the singers want to appear to be rappers, so they're too cool to be in their music videos crying for someone they love, crying for the person who broke their heart, or they're too cool to sing in the rain, they're too cool to grab a fistful of air and pull it back. All of this stuff was the thing to watch in R&B music videos, although it's extremely dramatic and some of it came across as a little bit corny, but it worked for the space of R&B, and only R&B singers could do that. And now that they are so busy trying to look like rappers with all of their jewelry, big clothes, and it kind of throws a lot of listeners off, because where is the aesthetic of R&B to match with the music of R&B? Here's a brief intermission to let you know my new poetry collection, A Home for Lonely Souls, Volume 2, is available on Amazon right now. And if you would like for me to read some poems from my book, I will gladly do so. Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. Back to the episode. My next point is the fact that R&B groups have become obsolete, which is unfortunate because in the 90s and even in the 80s, 70s, R&B and soul groups was given to us left and right. And what they were able to produce was absolute magic for them. And going into the 2000s, we slowly watched the R&B group format slowly die down. And it's to the point where I haven't seen an R&B group thrive in over 12 years. I could be wrong, but I just don't understand why that was taken away from us as listeners, because they brought something special to the table. And with no rhyme or reason, R&B groups just vanished. And I can't understand why, because they were very important to the space of R&B. Which brings me to my next point. The lack of artist development in R&B is egregious. These days, I'm all for all artists being able to own their freedom and become independent artists and release music whenever they want. But that comes at a cost. Nowadays, we have so many artists who aren't necessarily ready to release music, flood the market with okay music, decent music. But I believe with R&B, there has to be a certain level of creative development that allows the artist to hone their craft while being in the background, while being songwriters or producers or background vocalists, while also working on their own music so they can get better. Nowadays, they skip all of those and they're automatically pushed to the forefront. And it's just kind of a weird space to have someone who was never trained to be a good musician or a good vocalist, and suddenly they're just, I'm a singer now and I'm gonna make music. And I feel like that's why a lot of these singers nowadays are not great vocalists, because they were never traditionally trained. And I feel like that is important when it comes to being a vocalist. Speaking of music, check out my new spoken word song, Eye to Eye, streaming everywhere, and let me know if it's trash or cash in the comments. So thank you very much. Back to the video. Now I'm gonna close this video off with my last and final point. And this has nothing to do with the artists themselves, as they have no control over it. It's the fact that there are no longer any major platforms where an R&B artist can go on and showcase their talent. Obviously, we can see with the award ceremonies that R&B is never highlighted as a main genre. It's something that it's never highlighted. It's just kind of sad to see. But the main issue being is that all the platforms that used to be are no longer available, where MTV, VH1, BET were all great channels for musicians, not just R&B singers, but musicians as a whole to go on and perform. But that is gone. But I feel like all genres, R&B needed those platforms the most. They needed 106 in Park the most. They needed MTV's TRL the most. And even furthermore, growing up as a kid in the 90s was the coolest thing, because you can turn on your favorite television show, and at the end of that episode you see one of your favorite R&B singers hop up, and they may perform at the end. They will do a little acting in the middle of the episode, whereas you'll have Marcus Houston playing Roger, but by the end of the episode you might see bro as Batman of IMX. Like, that was dope. Or you have someone like Brian McKnight, who was literally doing a black television sitcom tour from the early 90s to the 2000s. Like, there was not a black television show Brian McKnight was not on. New Edition was on Family Matters. We had so many talented musicians on Moesha, the Parkers. It's endless, where we were able to see Drew Hill perform on TV. All that. A children's television show where they had acts like In Vogue, Total, TLC. The list goes on. Those platforms no longer exist. And because those platforms no longer exist, radio no longer plays R&B no more. It's all pop and rap. Where's the R&B? I remember my parents turning on the radio at any point. We're hearing Keith Sweat. We're hearing Jagged Edge, 112. It was a treat, and it was not just an R&B station. It was on mainstream radio, and listen to R&B music being played. I haven't heard an R&B song on the radio in a very long time. Well, I take that back. Outside of Chris Brown's Residuals and a few SZA songs, R&B is played, but other than that, I don't hear it often. And that's just really heartbreaking, because where do R&B artists go to show off their talents? They don't have it anymore, and it's clear as day that not having these platforms hurts R&B more than any other genre. As we can see, the Grammys don't even televise the nominees or award winners of any R&B category. And that's my rant for today. Thank you for listening. You have a good one.